Hello, welcome in. If you're here listening to this podcast, that means you are destined for something great, and we both know it to be true. So without further ado, welcome to the Dark Matter Podcast. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Dark Matter Podcast. Today we brought on another guest in Kate Allgood. She's the CEO of Quantum Performance and the creator of The Athlete Within, a mental performance training ecosystem designed to help athletes stay steady, focused, and effective under pressure. A former elite level athlete herself, Kate's work goes beyond mental skills, focusing on awareness, mindset, and emotional regulation so performance becomes sustainable, not forced. I'm super excited for this conversation. I actually am an athlete myself, and you played second highest tier in all of Canada. So I'm super excited, especially with a lot of the work that you do. Yes, welcome to the show, Kate.
No, thank you so much for having me. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
So you transitioned from elite athlete to entrepreneur, which is a path that many struggle with, and not in the way of, they've been elite athletes going into entrepreneurship, but maybe they're, high performers going into entrepreneurship. What were some of the internal shifts that you had to make, and how did that experience shape the kind of business you chose to build?
Very good question. I think one of the biggest ones that comes to mind is when you are an elite athlete or some form of high performer. My life as an athlete was very directed. I knew what I needed to do. I was being told by other people, this is what you need to do. And now my job was just to go do it. Go to the gym or go get the skating lessons, go do the shooting lessons because I was an ice hockey player, right? So I had the idea of what I needed. I had the direction. Now it was my job to go do the work. When you become an entrepreneur, at least for me, I didn't have that anymore. So now it's my job to figure out what's the direction, what's the structure going to look like, what is it that I actually need to do, and kind of have that, I guess, bigger and broader focus of really understanding where am I going and what do I need, and then also do the doing part at the same time. So I think that was probably the biggest internal shift of really being able to take that step back, see the bigger picture, and figure out that structure for myself.
Hmm. And I want to really leverage your mind here, because I know a lot of people can talk about entrepreneurship and these sorts of things, but I know you really specialize with performance and performing under pressure and mental performance. And so I want to ask this: mental performance is often oversimplified into motivation or maybe even positive thinking, but from your perspective, what do most people misunderstand about what actually helps someone perform under pressure?
Well, you just said it, right? A lot of people think it is just, I'm just going to think positive in that moment, or I just need to have the right level of motivation. And really, there's a couple key considerations. First is your preparation. So, have you front loaded your mental skills to be able to handle the pressure moments? And then, number two, when you're in the pressure moments, one of the very biggest things, first and foremost, is your self-regulation, is your ability to control your arousal state, to make sure that you then have access to your self-talk, to the confidence that you have, to the attention that you need to be able to then place in the different directions that are going to help kind of bring everything to the surface and allow you to perform at the highest stage. Sometimes people get into pressure moments and they think I just need to think my way through it in a correct way or have the right type of self-talk. But what people don't understand is if you don't have access to the right type of self-talk because you're in a very high level of arousal, then you're never, it doesn't matter how well you can talk to yourself, you won't have the ability to do that in that moment. So it really starts with your self-regulation. And then from there, your attention. And then you can start to kind of tap into some of these other skills that people usually think of when they think of, performing under pressure.
And when you say self-regulation, like what does that mean?
Really, a big part is your physiology, right? So when you think about when people step into pressure moments, you naturally start to your nervous system starts to sense the difference in that moment. And so you're going to get that increased heart rate. Your breathing is going to change. Uh, your muscles are going to maybe tense or tighten. So you have that very physiological response to that moment. And that's not good or bad. We kind of need that to a degree. But if it gets to a certain level where it's now really closing the door on your access to being able to control where you place your attention, that then becomes problematic. So we have to first and foremost make sure that that arousal level is in a good spot for somebody so that then they can sit there and go, okay, instead of focusing on maybe this past mistake I just made in the game, I'm able to take my attention, focus on the task at hand, the next step I need to take. But if your arousal is too high, you don't have such an easy job and you do get fixated maybe on that mistake or other things that really are distractions in that moment to being able to perform. And so self-regulation is really that ability to do the breathing techniques to control your arousal level, to be able to make sure that you're not in a sympathetic nervous system to the point where it's kind of robbing you of the ability and the access to all the other tools that you need.
Hmm. And I love this because I get it. And with you're saying arousal state, and this is something that I think we get because we're both athletes, but I think a lot of people, if they've never really competed at a very high level, they may not necessarily understand that. So could you just describe what the arousal state is and how, if someone isn't competing or doing something like that, how they could even enter that state themselves?
Yeah, the arousal state, everyone has a sweet spot, and a big part is understanding where your sweet spot is, because some people can function very well with a little bit of a higher kind of arousal state, and other people need it to be a little bit on the lower end. But the things you're going to really notice when it's similar to what athletes experience, nervousness, and just like what's the degree of that nervousness. I think everybody maybe has experienced that where you have little butterflies in your stomach, so that's a little bit of that activation of the arousal state to the point. Then you go to the other end of the spectrum where you're consumed with that nervousness. And then you have a really hard time being able to think of anything but the nervousness or to do anything that you know you need to do in that moment. And so that's just a, pretty, I think, general example that everyone's experienced, whether you're an athlete or you're someone in business or, a student who going into a test, right? There's a difference between having a little bit of nervousness and getting almost crippled by that nervousness where you sit down, you look at the test and none of the answers come to mind because you just can't pull it to the surface because the nervousness has kind of closed the door on that.
Hmm. I love the way that you describe that, and even the example, it makes it so easy to see. Even just the butterflies, you can relate to that, and you can see that. And I think a lot of people are at this point thinking back to a time where they could see that. Now, I guess, how important do you think in your line of work, in your experience, and some of the things that you've accomplished, how important is awareness?
Number one, very, very
Mm,
important, huge. If you're not aware, so if we're taking even the example of that nervousness, if you're not aware of the first signs of nervousness, you can't be as proactive. You can't start doing the breathing techniques or go ground yourself and do something to start to really make sure that you stay where you need to and not get kind of to that higher levels of arousal where now you really do notice it, but now it becomes much harder to be able to kind of get yourself back down. So most people become aware when they're pretty aroused in this instance, right? Where they're really, really nervous, they're not functioning as well, their muscles are super tight, their heart is racing. If you have more awareness, you can catch it a little bit earlier and make sure you're able to then self-direct yourself a lot easier.
do you think in your line of work, because you work currently with athletes, like
I do.
what do you currently do?
So what I currently do, mainly with athletes, I work on the mental performance for athletes. I have worked with some people in business as well as the military, being that I'm in San Diego, so there's obviously a lot of military personnel in the area. And so my entire job is kind of what we've been discussing is really helping them with a number of things, not just mindset and mental skills, but being able to really regulate their nervous system so that when they step into a pressure moment, one, they have had the skills and the preparation to be able to step into that moment, but then being able to access that in that moment. And that's really the biggest thing is what starts to happen to you when pressure or stress gets added to the equation. And it's not that, for a lot of athletes, it's not that they're actually not confident, but they'll use that wordage a lot of saying, I need more confidence or I wasn't confident in this situation. And a big part of it was they couldn't regulate themselves to allow all of the confidence they actually do have to be present in that moment. And so we need to look at it from a lot of different angles to make sure that they're doing things on a day-to-day basis, but then also what do we need to do when they're in those more critical moments.
Hmm. So it's almost kind of like you're teaching them how to use the different tools in their toolkit rather than showing them things that are new. But I think of course, there could be things that are new, like they're going to compound upon. But it seems like a lot of this is just really understanding because, like, mindset, awareness, emotional regulation, these are things that everyone has at a very, like, even different level. But you're basically teaching them how to be more, they're listening more to those things and acting, more on those things.
Well, they have access to those things. Part of it is also what you said, building on it, because a lot of athletes, even very high level athletes that come to me, they just haven't really focused much on this side of the equation. So there's still some things we might want to look at in terms of their mindset, the lens through which they're looking at things, because that's a big part of the equation. And the lens through which they're looking at it may need to be shifted a little bit. Um, and so there's that side of the equation. Same with their mental and emotional preparation. A lot of athletes understand the physical preparation. They do, the practices, the strength and conditioning, all of those various factors. But there's other things that you need to do. Like, are you training your attention? Are you focusing on that skill set, which a lot of people don't do? And part of that is they don't know what does that look like? What does that mean? And so that needs to also be trained because that is a huge part of when you do go into those pressure moments. If you have an intentional skill set that has been highly trained, it can withstand more. It makes it like more pressure has to exist for it to really to lose access to your attentional skill set. So we really want to make sure that that's pretty trained. But then at the same time, as you said, everyone has something. Nobody, a high level athlete, at least has some form of probably mindset that is going to work for them, or at least some level of confidence that is going to work for them. So as we're building everything, we still now want to allow access to what they have. And then as those skills grow, what they have access to obviously grows as well.
So with the athletes that come to work with you, like I think you kind of mentioned it here, it's just opening up the mindset, being more aware. I mean, what are the common things that you've seen in that? Like, why, what is the specific reason or the specific handful of reasons that people are like athletes are coming, just specifically athletes for now, and then we can go into the business because I know you do that as well, work with entrepreneurs.
I think the biggest thing, there's two really. One is they see a gap between what they do in practice and what they do in a game or performance. And so they're not able to, as I've been mentioning, access what they have at their disposal. They can see it, they know they have it, but something is missing when they now step into a competitive setting. And so really helping them being able to make sure that they can consistently perform in practice and in competition, or just consistently perform in the competition. Athletes will have it, 1 week or one game or one competition, and the next one it's not there, and they don't know why. They don't know why. Can I put it all together in one moment, and then it seemingly disappears in another moment? And then I think there's also just people who are understanding that this is a really important part of just being a high performer and want to more proactively start to build out this side of their performance and really sit there and say, okay, for me to be at my very best, I need to start training my mind. I need to start looking at this like I do my physical skill set and really start to get ahead of it. And nothing is really wrong, but I think they still maybe know there's maybe a slight gap between what their capacity is and what they're actually performing at.
So who would you recommend, start to work on these things? Like, because I feel like I think we both know the answer to it, but yeah, who would you recommend learn this sort of stuff?
Everyone, because it really is, it's the biggest thing because when you again look at competition, for you to perform the way that you want to be able to perform, it really is, can you access everything that you have within you in that moment? And if you're not training your mind, it interferes with that ability to access everything and allow everything to come to the surface and be at your disposal in that moment. And that means you will have inconsistent performances or not really reaching your ceiling in your performances.
So I know you mentioned before, like, it's the awareness is a big piece, and I know you also mentioned your attention. Now, how much of a factor is even something like, I mean, I guess it's kind of the same as like focus, but Is focus a big thing? Is focus basically the same thing as attention? And if someone is really wrestling with attention or lack of focus, what is like one thing that they could start to do to strengthen that muscle, if you will?
Yeah, so I guess a little bit of education on this. So attention is the umbrella. And so under attention, you have focus, you have awareness, and you have your executive functioning.
Mm,
So you need all. You need all three of those to be functioning at a very, very high level.
mm,
So when a lot of people say I need to just, focus better, um, it's really, are you focusing in the right way for the right moment?
mm,
We're always focusing, we're always paying attention to something, right? And then the same thing with your awareness. When we look at athletes, there's situational awareness, so awareness of things outside of yourself. And then there's meta awareness, so awareness of yourself.
mm.
And a lot of people will only think of the situational awareness, at least in the athlete context. So you have to train all of that. And one of the best ways to do that is through meditation. So that is what I give all of my clients to start to do because it helps to train attention. It's like going to the gym and doing push-ups for your attentional skill set. So that is absolutely the best way for someone to start really building that out.
I love meditation, and I'm sure you've probably read the book "Stress Less, Accomplish More" by Emily Fletcher.
Actually.
It's really good. And she talks about how it's the same thing. A lot of people like meditation is such an overlooked tool that you can use. And she says that she deals with corporate professionals, CEOs, athletes. There's so many people, professionals that come to her, and she teaches like the Ziva technique, where it's a 15-minute meditation. You could do it at any point in time. First starts with 5 minutes of like box breathing, so like the 4 seconds in, hold, and then the double the time out. And then the next thing, it's kind of like your awareness. So then you close your eyes, you start to like seek the highest noise possible, and then kind of like focus in on what that is, or the loudest noise, and then the quietest noise for the like the next 2 minutes and 30 seconds in that. And then the last thing is like the visualization, right? So having that clear goal and then like visualizing yourself there, like you can come out of that 15-minute meditation and feel incredible. Now, here's a question, because I love that you focus so much on meditation and you see how incredible it can be for the people. Like, what would you say to the people? Because I'm sure you've heard this before. I've tried meditation and it doesn't really work. Like, what would you say to those people uh, who just don't get it?
It's a hard thing for a lot of people to start to do. So obviously the type is a big thing, and that's something I do with my clients is making sure that the type for them maybe fits them the best. There can be what we consider silent meditation, so non-guided meditation.
Mm,
There can be guided, and definitely for some people, starting off with guided is much better for them. At least it gets them moving in that direction. The amount of time too is really important too, because I think a lot of people try too much too soon. Like I start my clients off at 3 to 5 minutes a day, and that is something they can wrap their brain around, and it's something they can do, right? They can sit there for, if 5 minutes is too much, we move it down to 3 minutes. And then with time, we will build it out. We will build out the time period that they're going to be doing. But I think they need to first, we want to first create that habit and making sure that this is something that they're wanting or going to consistently do. And then from there, we can start to, as I said, really build out the time. And I think even those small moments, though, as they do it, they start to see some of the benefits. They start to see like, why am I meditating? I also do a very good job, though, of making sure I do educate them on why I'm asking them to meditate because you
mm,
have to know why. You have to have a purpose. If there's no purpose, it doesn't matter. And to tell them that this is why it connects to attention, how it connects to attention, and then obviously the importance of attention for their athletic performance, right? It helps them to buy in. And that's really the big thing is they have to buy in. And then I make it bite size enough where they can, dip their toe in comfortably, and then we can continue to evolve it with time.
mm. So when you so say an athlete comes to you and they're like, "Hey, like I'm really wanting to improve my performance here. Like these are the certain things that are happening." And I know because with coaching and business as a whole, it's not really a one size fits all. It's usually a case by case. But I guess what is that process for you? So, a client comes and say they really want to focus, they're having a hard time in the moments. Like you said, it's kind of like inconsistent. Some days and some games they perform incredibly well, and other times it's very inconsistent with their how they're showing up with maybe their breathing and just how they're working. what would be your like game plan? What is your process to work with that person to then help them achieve that desired end result?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I have a pretty good flow with how I start off working with my clients. First is just obviously understanding the context, understanding where they're starting from, what's been going on, what sport they play, all these various factors, really understand that part of the equation. I then have all of my clients go through an assessment called the Test of Attentional Interpersonal Style Inventory, or TASE for short. And then I also have maybe a couple other quizzes and kind of then pull it all together. So I have to pull in the context, what I see from the assessments, and then from there, we're really going to be able to create that more unique approach for them. There's a lot of things, as I said, like everyone might need to make sure they can have access to their skills, but how we gain access will be different based off of what I see from the assessments and the context and what I kind of know about them, to make sure now that as we're moving through the program, I'm giving them the right approach or the right tool, the right type of meditation, whatever it might be, that's going to fit what their needs are based off of what their strengths are and what their vulnerabilities are.
Have you noticed a trend with like high performers and or athletes when it comes to maybe like fear, doubt, scarcity? Like, do you notice a common trend with what they're facing, what like they're wrestling with, and how does that differ from someone who is maybe like a beginner in like an athlete sense?
I don't, and once, interestingly, I don't think there's much difference between a beginner and a very seasoned athlete in terms of when you talk about self-doubt. There's usually four drivers of self-doubt,
Hmm.
and it's usually competence, control, identity, or acceptance.
Hmm.
So one of the things is figuring out what is the primary driver of a person's self-doubt. And then from there, we're not necessarily going to fix that. We're more going to look at how do we now train the systems beneath that, which goes into the conversation we've already been having, their self-regulation, attention, self-trust. And then from there, that's going to allow them to step into moments where maybe that self-doubt would sometimes take over and be able to still thrive. So, if you look at a high-level athlete and a low-level athlete, they may both have the self-doubt of acceptance, or that's what they're trying to protect within their system. And
Hmm.
it may get exposed, through the same way, or someone who, has a need to kind of protect their competence. That's what you see. Perfectionism is kind of the uh, how it gets expressed, is that need to kind of protect that. So you could have a, 15-year-old who's just beginning in a sport, or you could have a 25-year-old who's like at the highest level, and they may both be perfectionists because they're both kind of doing that. And from there, then there's no difference between the two.
Hmm. I like that answer a lot because I think it really opens it up. And I was really because I know you work with people at all different stages of their, professional career or in their journeys. And I always wonder if, someone who's playing professional, like at the highest tier, how they'd be different than me, who's maybe now just playing on the Sunday. You know what I mean? Like we're all gonna face fears, we're all gonna face doubts, but is it any really different when they're, playing on the bigger stage? And you played hockey. Like, what was that experience like here in Canada? Because you played in Canada. Like, what was that experience like? Did you start from a young age? Like, how did you know that this was something that you're going to be like doing long term? And then how far did you actually make it up there?
Yeah, so I started skating when I was 2 years old, I think as most Canadians do. And I was started playing organized hockey at 6. And back in when I was growing up, women's hockey really wasn't developed. So I started with the boys and played all the way up till about grade 7, just with the boys, and then did a couple of years of actually two teams. I did, I've been playing double A boys, and then I dropped down once hitting kind of came into the picture to single A boys, and then started playing with the girls at that time. And then as I moved into high school, more focused just on the girls because it had developed to a point at that time. And then went off. I did a year at Clarkson University for the very first year of the program there, was captain there. And then I came back and went to Brock and played 3 years there and won a number of awards. Anybody who understands university hockey there, won the BLG award for best, or not one, I was up for the BLG award, which is for basically the best female athlete in all of Canada. So there's four of us who get nominated. And then I won the Female Hockey Player of the Year. So I won quite a number of awards and was recognized. I was a Quest for Gold recipient, so I was on track to potentially play for the 2010 Olympics.
Wow.
So, and did a couple of years professionally. So I went quite far with hockey.
Wow, that's pretty incredible, and I'm so sorry I waited so long to kind of get into all of that because that is pretty incredible. I might edit that to put that closer at the beginning because that's pretty incredible stuff. And so, what were you doing like on the side? Were you doing anything on the side? You're obviously playing professionally, and then I guess at what point did you get into starting your business?
So well, back then, women's hockey and what's professional was very different. Back then, I was still in school and we were playing professional. It wasn't, you're not getting paid or anything of that nature. And I retired right when I finished my undergrad. So it just kind of coincided with me finishing up school. I would have continued if I'd continued playing pro. I initially started as a muscle activation techniques practitioner. And so I would have been, going to school for that and then practicing and doing that at the same time. Because again, you weren't going to get paid at that time. But I migrated down to San Diego pretty shortly after I graduated and then became a muscle activation techniques practitioner. And then a couple of years later, went back and got my two master's degrees and then morphed my business into what I do now.
And what was like, was there any challenges that you kind of had? Because I feel like every entrepreneur has some sort of challenges when they start taking that, leap of faith. Because I feel like, most people, like you were kind of saying at the beginning, when you are a high performer, sometimes like when you're on a team, you have your role to play, right? Everyone has their role, and then you kind of come together. But when you're an entrepreneur, I mean, you have to wear all the hats, you have to do all the roles. So did you experience any kind of setbacks or challenges or adversity when you were starting your business? Uh, when you just got started?
A lot. I learned a lot of hard lessons. And that was just, I think, for a number of reasons. One, I was in a new place. I didn't have any connections. I was obviously from Toronto, had a lot of connections there. Knew in one sense it probably would have been fairly easy to start a business. Having been a hockey player and still working with athletes, it would have, opened a lot of doors. So I was in a new place trying to start a business. Nobody in my family has ever been an entrepreneur, so I had nobody to like go talk to or be like, how does, what do I do here? And I kind of became an entrepreneur because whether it was the muscle activation techniques at first and then what I do now, there really wasn't many job openings or nobody's hiring for these positions. So you kind of, if you wanted to do it, you had to create it yourself. So I kind of stumbled upon being an entrepreneur simply because I followed my passion and decided that this is what I wanted to do and had to kind of create it for myself. So yeah, early on, a lot of hard lessons. And luckily, I started to find the right people to help guide me and figure out how do you actually run a business, not just be a practitioner. And that was, eventually obviously led to me really knowing what to do as an entrepreneur.
Do you still play now, hockey?
I do once a week. Yep, I'll play tomorrow.
Oh, very awesome. Because I was gonna say, was there any identity shifts for you when maybe you came like when I guess when you switched from playing pro and doing all those things to now playing, uh, like are you still playing at a high level or is it more like casual right now, like that you're playing?
Yeah, very casual. It's a organized pickup. I've played in, the beer leagues and the men adult leagues. Now it's, a guy has different skates during the week and people show up and it's still pretty high level, just simply because, I'm still playing majority of the time with still men, not, I think there's one or two other women that sometimes show up who, again, have gone off and played at like Harvard or NCAA at a high level.
Hmm.
So it's still fairly high. You get the odd beginner as well, so there's a good mix, but that's a pretty normal thing when you get older. So yeah, I'm not playing to like organized relay or go win a tournament or do any of that kind of stuff anymore. So, but the identity, that was a hard part. Retiring is definitely hard, but that's also part of what made me stay in San Diego and make a life here was I got to figure out who I was in a
Hmm.
different environment and not have the constant question of why did you retire or why didn't you make Team Canada? So it allowed me to kind of figure a lot of things out in an environment where people just got to know me and then eventually they'd find out obviously my athletic background.
Right. Yeah, I love that answer because for me, I fractured my ankle. Like it was a pretty bad fracture, so then I couldn't play for a long time. And then I just kept feeling like, oh, I once I get through this, once I get through this, and I realized almost a year later I still can't run, and it's just like it gets to me. I sometimes get a little emotional when I remember how I used to play, And then I realized like all the things I was able to do and how long it took me to get back to that point. Now I still can't even. Now I can finally run almost a little after 2 years. This will be 3 years in April since like my anniversary since the fracture. Now I'm able to run, but before it was like really difficult. So I just wondered, and you kind of mentioned, yeah, like it is a little difficult. Have you? Well, we'll talk about that after. Actually, I was going to mention if you've seen a show there because it's pretty funny. But yeah, I mean, this has been super incredible, and I think even just some of the things around doubt, like those four components, I feel like this is a very packed episode with golden gems, and yeah, I'm really happy about the how this turned out so far. I guess for the listener that gets all the way here, whether, and again with my audience, they're online coaches, they're whether they're thriving right now or looking to get into the space, they're high performers, they probably play a little sports too. What would you say is like maybe the lesson for the year, or like one, needle moving shift that you could, really inspire someone with here at this point?
I think the biggest thing, regardless of who they are, what they're doing, is really put an emphasis on training your attention because of the impact it's going to have on so many other things. Like the ripple effect it has is massive, right? From being able to whether it's focus better, make decisions better, have better awareness. A lot of people talk about, being able to be more of the observer when we talk about meditation, and that's, another huge part of the equation, right? To really be able to be aware of yourself so you don't react, you can respond and create that space between, stimulus and response. So I think for somebody, no matter who they are, if you place a lot of attention on training your attention, that's going to move the needle for you.
I think it was like Alan Stein Jr. He used to talk about when he worked with Kobe Bryant, and they used to say like next play, focus on the next play. And I feel like you touched on something there too. That's kind of like how much do we dwell on our current situation or the past mistake and these sorts of things, and what is our ability to move things forward? And just yeah, I really like that. Where can people find more of, what you're up to if they would like to learn more about the services that you offer, and then connect? Yeah, where can they do that?
Yeah, probably one of the best places is my website, which is qpathlete.com, because there you're going to see my one-on-one services. I have an app that I've created. My books are that I've written are on there as well. Instagram, my handle is also QP Athlete, so that's another option. So that's probably one of the two best places if you're looking to connect and find out more information.
Incredible, Kate. As always, the links will be down below to connect with Kate. I highly recommend it. This has been such an incredible episode. And to the listener, thank you so much. We're currently in 39 countries and growing, so please do continue sharing the show, all that jazz. Thank you so much for tuning in, and as always, I'll catch you on the next one. If you enjoyed today's episode, please like, comment, share, subscribe to it all. I appreciate it. And as always, I'll catch you on the next one.